Well, as I said a few moments ago, today I'm going to share with you the final installment, the final lesson from the series After, and I'm calling this the restored one, the restored one. Before I've relied on geographical, like the Jerusalem 10, make that 11, the Galilean 7, but this one, I simply had to boil it down to this. It is all about restoration. It's about the restored one. And it has to do with, really, what Christ does with our failure. Have you ever felt like you messed things up so bad that there's absolutely no way that you can unwind the mess that you've created? Or maybe you've done something so significant that you feel as though you could never be forgiven for it. Maybe you couldn't even forgive yourself. And inside, you're so troubled. Which, by the way, that's a good response. And if you've ever felt that way, or if you feel that way today, you're not alone. We've all felt that way at different times in our life. And today, from the Bible, I want to talk to you about one who basically is just like us, or maybe I should say we're just like him. And of course, that's Peter. You've heard it so many times. Peter could rise higher and fall faster than anybody else, it seems like, in Scripture. At one moment, he could utter what could only be described as a direct revelation by the Holy Spirit of God in proclaiming that Jesus is the Christ. And the very next moment, the one that he just proclaimed to be Christ would have to rebuke him and say, "Get behind me because you're speaking for Satan." That's Peter. Sometimes that seems to be our lives. Ups, downs, all arounds, turned around. He indeed, Peter, is the fulfillment of the scripture that says, the flesh is willing, but the spirit is weak. He had good intentions so often, but he just couldn't follow through. He seemed to fail. He was definitely, though, as you trace his story, in the process of becoming. He may not have known what, but he was definitely on his way. There was so much more for Peter to experience, and Jesus was going to see to it that would happen. That Peter would become all that God had intended him to be, despite his failure. This sermon is about his failure, which is so shocking that we still talk about it all these years later, 2,000 years later. And it kind of has two parts. And the first part of Peter's story deals with his three-part denial, his 3 times denying Jesus when he was arrested. And the second part is really how Jesus came to him and restored him. The first part was all on Peter. That was Peter at his best. That was Peter just being Peter. And the second part was all about Jesus and Jesus just being Jesus. And as we'll see, Jesus always wins out if we go head to head with him. He always wins out if we're willing to face our failure and to meet with him. Let me go ahead and read the scripture from John, chapter 21, verses 15 through 19. John 21, 15 through 19. It says this, when they had finished eating, that was the meal around the fire that we talked about last week after the fishing trip where a bunch of fish were caught. And Peter jumped in the water and swam to Jesus, and they have a meal. And when that meal was finished, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." And Jesus then said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Then Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time, he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. And then Jesus continues and he says this, very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and you went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me, or more literally, keep following me. Peter may have given up on himself, but Jesus didn't give up on him. Behind this story is a wonderful, hope-filled, liberating truth. And it's this: failure only has to be an event, not a destiny. Failure only has to be an event, but it doesn't have to be your destiny. This is good news because sooner or later we all fail, and we fail more than once. We fail repeatedly, it seems like. And as Peter's story abundantly proves, it's not our initial failure necessarily that ruins us. It's what happens later that matters. It's not how you start, someone said. It's how you finish. Failure doesn't mean that you've blown everything. It means that you have some hard lessons to learn. It doesn't mean that you are a permanent loser. It means that you aren't as smart as you thought that you were. It doesn't mean that you should give up. It means that you need the Lord to show you the next steps. It doesn't mean that God has abandoned you either. It means that God has a better plan than the one you could come up with. And only those who have greatly failed would be moved by this story of Peter. If you've only failed in small ways, not much impact. But if you've really messed things up in the past, then Peter's story should speak to you. I know that it spoke to me this week as I was working on it and preparing it. It was just kind of one of those things that came so naturally because of so many failures. And you know, when you prepare something like this, usually you get more out of it than the people that you share it with. Because I've been wrestling with this all week, and I've been thinking about all the times that I failed. But then I'm reminded, and so I want to remind you that if you have failed greatly, this story's for you. I know that it's for me. Sometimes when we fail, it involves the people that we care about and love the most. And it seems like in those times, that's when the cut goes the deepest. It hurts us, but more than that, it hurts the other person. And we're compelled then, if our heart is tender towards doing the right thing, we are compelled, we're driven to go and make things right, to ensure that the love is still intact. We ask ourselves, have we blown everything? Have we lost all our trust? That's on one side. On the other side, we may say, I don't even know if I can forgive myself because I messed up so bad and it seems to be so much of a pattern in my life. And you know, when I come to that place, what I have to do and what we all need to do, that's this: take ownership for our failure and then let Jesus do surgery on us and clean us up. And today, as we look at Peter's story, and it's broken down into 5 stages. We'll say 5 stages. What we see as we look at that story is how Jesus restores someone who's fallen. This is what Jesus does to a disciple who's failed over and over and over again. And the wonderful thing is, because we're in that story too as a disciple, He'll do the very same thing for us. And so often He does it in the same way. And so you want to keep your ears and your heart open today, because when you fail, you can know that Jesus is going to operate in the same way as He did with Peter. And the first thing that He did with Peter is He sent for Peter. When you mess up, listen for Jesus' voice. He's probably calling, "Hey, Rob, you messed up again. Hey, Joe. Hey, Tom." I don't want to say Mary Lou because I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to mess up. Now let me give you some examples. Let me take you back to when the women first arrived at the tomb after Jesus' resurrection. And remember, an angel made an announcement of the good news to Mary, and he said, "Go and tell the disciples and Peter." He's sending for Peter. Go and tell the disciples and Peter. What does it mean, His disciples and Peter? Peter's denial had separated him from the other disciples as the leader of the group. No doubt he wondered many times in that time frame over and over to himself, what am I now? Am I a traitor? Am I a failure? Am I a disciple? Where do I stand with Jesus? He'd failed him already in the upper room just a few hours earlier, but it doesn't matter. Jesus said, "Go tell my disciples and Peter that I'm alive and that I'm going to meet with them." So even though Peter failed just a few hours earlier in the upper room, Jesus still wanted to meet with him. When Jesus, in an act of servanthood and humility, laying out the foundation for how the kingdom is supposed to operate, and He goes to wash Peter's feet, Peter says, No, Jesus, you're not going to wash my feet. And Jesus said, "If I don't do this, you will have no part in my kingdom, because this is how it operates." What Peter had done in pride was refuse the service of Jesus in his life, and in doing so, for pride, he hindered humility that it takes to follow and to serve Jesus, as Jesus laid out the example before him. In that upper room, he didn't just do that. I mean, he bragged, "Hey, if everybody else leaves you, I'll stand right by your side. I'll fight for you. I'll die for you." But it wasn't very long. Just a few hours later, this bold, confident disciple turned chicken. Kind of literally. Even before that, remember, after the disciples and Jesus, after they leave the upper room, they go to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. And after they have prayed, the temple guard come to arrest Jesus, and Peter pulls out his sword and he attacks Malchus, one of the guards, the servant of the high priest, and he cuts off his ear. Even despite that, Jesus still sent for him, "Go tell my disciples." And Peter had failed. Peter thought that the kingdom was going to come in this kind of power. Oh, great, now we get to fight. And Jesus said, "Peter, put your sword away while I put this guy's ear back on, because that's not how things are done. You messed up again. That's not how we do things." And then we see Peter, just a little while after that, in the courtyard, as Jesus is on trial at the home of the high priest, Caiaphas. After having just said, "I'll never leave you, I'll die for you, I'll never deny you." A middle school girl says, "Are you one of the men that was with Jesus?" "Jesus, I don't know him," Peter said. Didn't I see you with his disciples?" "I don't know the man." "Aren't you a follower of Jesus of Nazareth?" And then he begins to swear, perhaps as only a fisherman can swear. The scripture doesn't really tell us what he said, but he did swear. And he said, "I tell you, I don't know that man." Now his swearing was much more severe than using bad words, although that's bad. He was denying the living God. That's to swear an oath against Jesus. To save his own skin, the bold, confident disciple turned chicken. And don't we so often make bold claims, and then when the heat is on, we fail to follow through with what we say that we're going to do, and we fail, but it doesn't change the fact. We may, like Peter, weep bitterly, but it doesn't change Jesus' position and his desire to send for us so that he can, number two, meet with us. He sends for us because he hasn't written us off. And you wonder, because he had to send for Peter, where Peter was after he denied Christ. You see, the scriptures really don't tell us where he went. But we could surmise that Peter did what most of us do, just human nature. When we failed, we retreat. In essence, we do one of two things. We either continue to boast even louder to cover up our failure and to try to persuade the other person that it's not so bad or that we're not so culpable, or we run and hide. Because we have no record, we can only make this supposition that Peter went and hid. And we can make that supposition on the basis of a couple of things. Number one, Scripture doesn't tell us, and maybe that's just because that is not pertinent. But the other, more perhaps relevant issue is this, that sin always separates us from God and from others. A trust is broken, and so it's very possible, maybe even probable, that after Peter failed in this way, denying Christ 3 times, that he simply retreated. He went and he hid, but he couldn't hide well enough that Jesus couldn't find him. He went into self-imposed solitary confinement, because that's so often what we do. And I think that's what happened to Peter. I can only guess. And wherever he was, though, just like with us, once we get there, we find ourselves all alone in the world. I mean, the last thing we know about Peter is that after he denied Christ 3 times, and after Jesus' trial, Jesus walks out and he looks at Peter as the rooster crows for the last time. And it must have cut Peter to the heart, and all he could do was weep bitterly and then perhaps retreat. We're not told where he was during the crucifixion. We're not told where he was late that afternoon during the time of burial. All we can guess is that he found a lonely spot there to replay. Because isn't that what we do when we mess up? We replay things over and over in our minds, and we beat ourselves up over and over and over again. And we say, why did we do that? You know what I say? Joe, you big dummy. Or, I've seen dumb before, but man, that was dumb. That's typical of you. I don't know what you say, but I'm confident that you failed. That's what I say to myself. I withdraw, I go into myself, I say, why did I do that? What made me think that I was so much better than the others? He made that bold proclamation Even if all of these leave you, I won't. He just betrayed his best friends in front of them. And there's all kind of tension, if you remember, in the upper room. And Peter is right in the middle of all that. Who's going to be the greatest? James and John and, their mom, they have their own issues, but Peter has another issue. And you know how it goes when pride gets the best of you. Who's going to get to sit on your right and left? Oh, look. James and John, their mom's getting involved. Peter's like, I'm not playing that game. Listen, everybody leaves you. Not me. And so the more bold your braggadocious attitude, the farther you may fall into isolation and into hurt, into turning that in on yourself. But that's okay. Even when you do that, Jesus wants to meet with you. And you may ask yourself, what does Jesus think of me now? Have you ever thought that? You beat yourself up so bad that you don't think that Jesus would ever have anything to do with you again because you've fallen so far in such a short period of time. You were on top and now you're on the bottom. What does Jesus think of me? I hope that you think that from time to time and you don't simply justify your bad behavior. You have to come to the place where you ask yourself, what does Jesus think of me now? He still wanted to meet with him. So in a way, that answers the question. The fact that Jesus made a special appearance to Peter because he thought enough of him to not leave him where he was. And that's what he does for us. When we withdraw into ourselves because of our own silly, stupid failure and sin, we can be sure that not only will Jesus send for us, but he'll come and meet with us, and he won't leave us there. And we know that Jesus came to meet with Peter individually because in the Gospel of Luke, it mentions that meeting, no details. And then Paul also writes about it when he's talking about the resurrection in 1 Corinthians 15, when he says these words. He was raised on the third day, according to the Scriptures, and then he appeared to Peter and then the 12. Not necessarily the 12, but the whole group. That's how we can look at that 12. So there was a time when Jesus, at some point in the chronology of all of those events, that Jesus personally came to meet with Peter because Peter had fallen so far and he was the leader of the group and he would set the tone for the rest of the disciples, and Jesus had to get to him. He sent for him and he met with him. What amazing grace we see in that scene, because in Jesus' private meeting with Peter, we find this great truth, that Jesus is not into public humiliation. He takes care of that later. Not necessarily the humiliation part, but the public part. Here he goes to Peter because Peter needs to be restored before he can go on. And he doesn't do it in front of everybody. He doesn't try to shame. He doesn't lash out. Jesus doesn't lash out. He goes to Peter to avoid humiliating him. Because the offense was leveled directly at Jesus, in essence, Jesus went to him first, and that's what we should do. I mean, isn't that following Jesus' own model? If somebody has an offense that occurs one to another, aren't you supposed to go to that person? If you did it and you know about it, you go to that person. You don't tell other people and try to make it like it's a matter of prayer or something. You go to the person and you make it right. And if you've been wronged, or if you've wronged someone else, before you even come to God, if you realize that you've done that, you need to go and make it right with that person. And so Jesus is doing just that. He sends for Peter, and then he goes and he meets with Peter, and he doesn't humiliate him. He takes care of business on Peter's level. And that's what Jesus does with us when we fail. And he challenged him, though. Make no mistake about it. It wasn't some private meeting where they were slapping one another on the back. There was definitely a challenge, which is the next stage. He'll send for you and he'll meet with you, but when you meet, he will definitely challenge you. And that's where we come to John chapter 21 in that passage that we talked about last week. It's evening on the Sea of Galilee, and Peter gets up and he says, hey, I'm going to go fishing, guys. Now they're in Galilee because that's where Jesus said he was going to meet his disciples. Matter of fact, that's a bigger part of the direction. Hey, go tell my disciples and Peter to go to Galilee and I'll meet them there. So they're in Galilee and now it's evening and Peter's like, hey, I'm going to go fishing. And the guy said, hey, that sounds like a great idea. And there's 7 of them in all. And so they go out and they start fishing and they get frustrated because they've been fishing all night and they haven't caught anything. And then there appears a man, a stranger on the beach, and he calls out to them, hey, have you guys caught anything? No, we haven't caught anything. Well, throw your nets on the other side. Perhaps out of frustration. Well, we tried everything else. They did it. And when they did, after all of the frustration and the failure of the night before, the all-night fishing trip that left them wet, cold, and empty-handed, they threw their nets on the other side of the boat, and lo and behold, 153 fish jumped in the net, and they could hardly get the boat to shore with the nets intact. As a matter of fact, Peter jumped out of the boat. It's still the same crazy guy. He jumps out of the boat, and he swims to Jesus in full garb. He puts his clothes on before he jumps back into water. And he swims to Jesus. And when he gets to Jesus, it's like, Peter, you probably want to help the guys get all the fish in. You know, you forgot about your buddies. So Peter goes back out and he helps them to get the nets in. And my point in saying this is the same point as last week. Jesus had to allow the frustration and failure to come into their life so that he could demonstrate this fact that only with Jesus' direction and obedience to it can you really have success. You will try and try and try, and in the end, all of your trying will end up in failure if you only do it in your own strength. I'm not saying the disciples were wrong for going out fishing. I'm saying Jesus used this to demonstrate a point that even when we fail after making the best effort that we can, if we'll simply be challenged to shift our trust from ourselves to Jesus, that is the formula for success. Bill Gates said this, success is a lousy teacher. It makes smart people think they can't lose. Success is a lousy teacher. It makes smart people think they can't lose. The disciples were just men. They had to be frustrated. Jesus went to them. I don't know if he was there all night. I know they didn't notice him till the morning. It doesn't matter. When he showed up and he gave them instruction, they had to have come to the end of themselves to do what he told them to do. Otherwise, they might have said, like we do so many times when Jesus calls to our hearts, before we ever fail, we're on the road to failure, but we don't know it. We think we got it all under control. Hey, Joe, try something different. Like, try it my way this time instead of your way. I'll still be here when you fail, but, you know, you could avoid a lot of trouble if you just do it my way the first time. And sometimes I listen, but sometimes I don't. And in this case, they came to the end of themselves. Maybe they had to feed their families. Maybe they had to feed themselves. So they simply listened to Jesus. And a wonderful thing emerges in the challenge of it all. Because although Jesus had met with Peter already prior to this, he's going to meet with Peter again. And so when we read that passage right before ours, 1 through 14 in John 21, we should connect that great catch of fish with Luke 5, where another great catch of fish took place. Remember, Jesus told Peter, launch out into the deep in the middle of the day, which is not a time to be fishing in that part of the world. And Peter obeyed for the first time. And when he did, he recognized who Jesus was. He filled up 2 boatfuls of fish that day. And so now at this point, everything begins in Peter's mind to come full circle. The first time I put my faith in Jesus, this is what happened. Now the second time I put my faith in Jesus, this is what happened. Out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let everything be established. I'll fail on my own, but when I'm obedient to what Jesus says, that, my friends, is the formula for success. That's when I win, and if I win, he wins. As a matter of fact, he already won. We just get to jump on the boat with him and catch all the fish. He does all the work. He has the plan. But it's the same question that he asks us every day of our lives. Will you trust me? That's the challenge. Or will you trust your own heart? Will you trust me? Or will you trust your own plans? Will you obey me when the future seems uncertain? Or will you begin to manipulate and control? Will you obey your own instincts? Or will you obey me? Will you obey even when you failed on your own? Or do you just want to stay there? Do you not want Jesus to send for you? Do you not want him to meet with you? Do you not want him to challenge you? Because there's plenty of room for you to stay there. And when you get there, you think that you're alone, but you'll find a whole lot of other people there because they've never invited Jesus. They've never taken responsibility and invited Jesus to come and meet with them and allow him to issue the challenge. Will you trust him and not yourself? It's not will you trust him more than yourself. That will set you up for failure. It's will you trust him and not yourself. That's the challenge. And so when the breakfast was over, and this is our text today, Jesus and Peter had a little chat. And there was a great purpose in that chat. Jesus had a plan, and he knew that it was exactly what Peter needed. And number 4, he reinstated Peter. And this is the part of the story that we know best, beginning in verse 15, and I'll read through verse 17 again. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John. Now you know when all those names are used, it's some serious business, right? Yeah, when I'm driving and my wife says Joseph, which is all the time, I know that I better look out, hit the brake, hit the gas, change lanes, do something. Because it's serious. So when they finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? That's how the NIV translates it, because the word there is agape. Do you love me with an unselfish love? Do you love me with a noble love? More than these? Remember his boast. Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I phileo you. I love you with a dedicated brotherly type love. You know that I'm with you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs then. Again, a second time, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you agape me? Do you truly? Come on, Peter. Do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know I love you. And Jesus said, okay, well then take care of my sheep. But it didn't end there. The third time, Jesus said to him, Simon, son of John, do you phileo me? Are you dedicated to me? Some people think that Jesus stepped down to meet Peter where he was. But the truth is, and at least my research has shown me, that John often uses these terms interchangeably. So even though there is in Greek a distinction because of the Christian experience, with agape being that most loyal, most godlike type love, that most selfless love. They used it interchangeably in their conversations. At least John does when he records his gospel. So unless you think that Jesus will surmise to your will and your refusal to fully commit, you're wrong. Jesus will not do that. He simply uses Peter's own words against him. Okay, that's the way you want to be. Let me turn this around. I know what's really in your heart, Peter, but you have to know what's really in your heart. So I'll go to any means. You know, we use words interchangeably to express the exact same thought. And that's what's happening here. A conversation between two people. That's all. As Jesus reinstates him. And so after that third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, maybe I don't know it all after all. You know all things, and you know that I love you. Jesus said, okay, that's what I needed to hear. No. Jesus already knew it. That's what Peter needed to hear. Okay, feed my sheep. Because unlike so many in the world around us, and maybe even we've done this ourselves, when we fail, Jesus doesn't turn his back on us. He reaffirms his love for us. If he didn't love Peter, he would have never gone to him in the first place. Peter felt like he stepped out of line of God's plan, and Jesus offered him a way back in. As painful as it was, though, Jesus had to ask him 3 times. Peter, do you really love me? Really? Truly? Okay. Do what I ask. And remember, it was around a charcoal fire. The same kind of fire mentioned only one other place in Scripture, John 18. It was around a charcoal fire that not only this scene unfolds, but also the scene where Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Here, what Jesus is doing is, for every time Peter denied knowing Christ, he reaffirmed his love for Peter. Even in Peter's answer, we see Jesus' great love and care. Because he didn't give up. He didn't write him off. Peter, do you really love me? Yeah, more than these? And I think the implication is the other guy standing around. I mean, talk about putting Peter on the spot. Lord, you know that I love you more than these. What? I think it's interesting that by one fire, Peter said, I don't know you. By another one, Peter said, you know I love you. By one fire, he denied Christ. And by the other, Jesus took the initiative and reinstated him. Now, 2 questions do come to mind, and I've already answered one, and that is, why the 3 questions? The other question is, why did Jesus do it publicly this time? The first time he did it in private to avoid the humiliation of Peter. But the second time he did it publicly. Why? Because Peter had publicly denied him. Not only did Peter need to hear, but the other disciples needed to hear Peter make the confession of his dedication and love to Jesus. He was the one that was going to be setting the stage really for the rest of the disciples. And if he didn't do this publicly, there would always be a question perhaps in his own mind, in his own heart. Do I really love Jesus as much as I think I do? And the disciples needed to hear that too. They had to have confidence in the person who was acting as their human leader at that moment. It was a public thing. The man who had been so boastful, so sure of himself, so confident of his own courage, is now thoroughly humbled with the first question, do you love me more than these? And notice when he gives his answer, he refuses to compare. He won't even compare himself to anyone else. But Jesus is cleaning the wound. Still, still, he doesn't try to make him feel guilty. I want to just belabor this for just a moment. When Jesus asked Peter, even the first time, do you love me? Notice what he didn't do, which is so often what we do. He didn't say, why did you do that? I can't believe that you did that. You know, you really messed up when you did that. He didn't put some guilt on him. He didn't put some shame on him. He simply asked the question, do you love me? That's all. It was a hard question, but it had to be asked. Even the second time, when Jesus asked him, why did he do it twice? I mean, wasn't once enough? No, because Peter also, not only did the disciples and Peter need to hear the confirmation of his love, but also, I think that the only way that Peter could grasp Christ's forgiveness was to hear it more than once. And isn't that so often true with us? Even after we know we need confirmation. I mean, speaking as a husband, I don't need to say anymore. But it can go to a third time, and that's what it did. Christ asked the question a third time, and Peter's heart was grieved, and he blurts out, Lord, you know all things. And with those words, finally, Jesus gets Peter to the point where he has to denounce his own self-reliance. I don't know everything. Lord, you know I'll never. You know. Hey, listen, all these other guys, Peter was so confident in himself. But the third time, finally, Peter's heart is so hurt. He's so humbled, which is, by the way, the proper response when Jesus comes to you after you've failed, after you've sinned. You humble yourself. There's no self-justification as far as Jesus is concerned. He knows the truth. Someone said, the truth will set you free, but it'll hurt first. Peter had to face the truth. I don't know everything. Lord, you know all things. Why are you hurting my heart? Because your heart needed to hurt so that I could get you back to the place where you needed to be. You needed to make that confession so that you could know that even if you've given up on yourself, I'm still on your side. I'm still your general. And I want to re-enlist you into my army. Peter, here are the 3 qualifications. Love, love, love. I know what you're thinking. That's all you need. And that's right. That's what you need. Jesus sent for him in love. He met with him in love. He challenged him in love. And he reinstated him in love. And here, number 5, as his general, he's going to re-enlist him. Verses 18 and 19. And I'll make this quick. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself, Jesus said, and went where you wanted to go. That's the old Peter. That's when he was young. How ironic. That's the old Peter when he was young. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you don't want to go. That's the new Peter. You used to live for yourself. But from now on, until the end of your life, you're going to live and die for me. Verse 19. And Jesus said all this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. Or literally, keep following me. Even when Peter gave up on himself, Jesus hadn't given up on Peter. So with Jesus' words, it was really a prophecy, a prediction of Peter's entire career. Peter, you have a new responsibility, a new danger, and a violent death. Yippee! But here's the amazing thing. This is why I can say yippee. Jesus placed Peter in the very same category that he was in. This is your new reality. You don't live for yourself. Jesus did absolutely nothing apart from the Father and in the power of the Spirit. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. 3 in 1. And they do things always in agreement. Peter, you're going to come into agreement with me. You're going to identify with me by living and dying, not for yourself, but for me. You see, that's the real recipe for success. Living and dying for Jesus. As a matter of fact, as one great apostle said, we die daily. Every day we die to ourselves. It's a never-ending cycle. But if in the end you want to glorify God with your life, like Jesus is challenging Peter to do right here, you have to die to yourself. You have to say, Lord, I trust you and not me. And if you do, ultimately your life will glorify God. So, just keep on following me. And that's exactly what Peter did. Not too many days after that, it wasn't the same old Peter that made proud boast and then denied Christ. It was Peter who stood up on the day of Pentecost after being filled with the Holy Spirit and preached the gospel in the face of detractors, but also pilgrims, people whose heart was soft and welcoming to the fact that Jesus wanted to meet with them and to challenge them and to change them and to reinstate them, to re-enlist them into His army. And 3,000 people got saved that day. And when charges were leveled against Peter by the officials in charge who had the power to cause him great pain, he said, listen, is it better to listen to man or to God? I think I'm going to choose God, so you do whatever you have to do. I'm going to do whatever Jesus tells me to do. I've learned my lesson from my failure. And tradition said that when it came down to the end of Peter's life, he was crucified upside down. He did stretch out his hands, but not in the way that Jesus did. He did it upside down because he said, if tradition is accurate, that he wasn't worthy to die in the same manner as his Lord, the one who had never failed. So if you ask me, what does Jesus do with failure? He turns it all around. He does it for your good and for His own glory. God is able. Here's the amazing thing in it all. God is able to forget your past. I love what Erwin Lutzer said, kind of paraphrasing Scripture. God throws our sins into the depths of the sea and puts a sign up on the shore that reads, "No fishing." Erwin Lutzer. I like that. No fishing. Peter is such an interesting figure. As I close, stand with me. He's such an interesting figure. And I'll tell you why. Because his story is our story. Is it not? We see Peter every day when we get up and look in the mirror. A failure without him waiting to happen. But with him, success. Not because we have it all together, but because He has it all together. And He's made a way, and He won't give up on us, and He'll turn everything around. Listen, John 21, among other reasons, is in the Bible to remind us that all of us Peter-like people that think we are so much of a rock are really so unrock-like that it takes Jesus to step into our circumstance and turn things around and create character in us where character didn't exist. Where failure loomed heavy, the success of God for the glory of God is now our testimony. And so I ask you today, have you failed? Failed yourself? Failed Jesus? Failed someone? Failed anyone in any way, and you need Jesus to meet with you? You're in the right place today. He wants to meet with you. I know He's sending for you. He wants to challenge you. He wants to get you on the right track. He wants to get you where you need to be and reinstate you and re-enlist you. And He wants you to keep on following Him. So as Rob just sings a chorus or two, before I come back to pray, just do some soul searching. Seek out the failure in your own heart and invite Jesus into your situation and let Him turn it around and make something great out of it and bring Him glory. Rob?
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. The cross before me, the world behind me. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back, no turning back.
Again, Lord, today, may that be our testimony. No turning back. The cross may be before us. We may have to die to ourselves. But Lord, in that death comes new life. So Lord, whatever our failures are, I pray now God, that you would mend our hearts, that you would bring us out of isolation, that you would do your surgery, that you would clean up our wounds. And Lord, if we've sinned against someone else, give us the courage to go and make that right too. Lord, maybe that's another lesson. But it's a lesson in following you, and that's what we want to do. So God, give us the courage and strength to do just that. To keep following you. To keep loving you. To keep trusting you. In Jesus' name.